in moments, even when I'm just not meditating, I start picking up on like these freaking stories and shit, and like seeing movies in my head that I haven't seen before. And I've started wondering, like, am I picking up on like television signals and stuff? And like sometimes like I feel like I'm hearing people talking, like a conversation. I'm like, is this me? Like, is my mind just making this up, or am I tuning in to like an actual conversation that's happening somewhere? And that has been tripping me out. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's like it's happened enough times at this point where I'm like, I'm fucking watching a movie in my head right now. Like, I don't think this is just my subconscious type thing.
Thanks for tuning in for the ReMinders podcast. So I've got a nice lineup of goodies for you this seasonal episode. First off, I'm welcoming back my dear friend Selena. Selena was our first guest on the podcast, so a nice full circle moment as we're circling back to the solstice season. And I'm also sharing a song with her and with you for a part of our mini-series mindful reviews of my song Gifts of Awakening. So this song came to me as a direct inspiration from learning about this alternative origin story of the Santa Claus aesthetic. So the whole red and white, the chimney, the ornaments, the stockings, where does all that come from? So I heard this maybe 4 years ago or something. And the idea is that in Siberia, shamans of old would notice their reindeer eating these red and white mushrooms. You know, the classic mushroom emoji that you probably have on your phone. Made an appearance in Mario, and yeah, just that iconic red and white mushroom. Not the most common magic mushroom, but definitely the most iconic aesthetic. So the idea was these mushrooms grow under, what's that type of tree called? The Christmas tree? Evergreens. And so that's the idea of like presents under a tree. And the reindeer would eat these mushrooms and start acting all funky and whimsical and whatever. And so people were noticing this, like, what's up with that? And so it turns out these mushrooms are poisonous to humans, and especially in larger doses. But they found out that if they were to eat the yellow snow from the reindeers after the reindeer ingested said mushrooms, that would filtrate the toxins out while keeping the psychoactives in. So kind of gross, kind of hilarious. So I wrote this song out of inspiration for that. And the thing about the stockings comes from that they would dry the mushrooms over fireplaces and socks. So that's the idea of the stockings. And the ornaments, they would also hang them in trees and stuff like that. So that's the idea, to dry them out. And so yeah, shaman of old would pop down the chimneys if there was a heavy snowfall and door access wasn't feasible, and just pop in and out of chimneys and yada yada yada. So I thought it was a pretty funny story. Whether or not it's true or not, I'm sure it is. In an infinite universe, you know, there's probably that probably did happen, right? Whether or not that is a synchronistic coincidence with why that's prevalent in our culture, who knows, who cares? But I wrote this fun little song about it. So we're going to enter a brief guided centering practice and then give a critical listen to this song. It's only about 3 minutes. And then Selena and I kick off into a conversation mostly centered around boundaries, seem to be the topic that we came back to, or the theme. And we're talking about like EMFs and all sorts of stuff. So beautiful conversation with a beautiful friend, and appreciate you guys listening. Cool, sweet. Thanks for doing this with me. So let's take some nice centering breaths. Just noticing the sensation of the air moving through and into our nostrils, into our chest. Let's bring the airflow even deeper with each breath, eventually bringing it all the way down to our belly, our bellies, down to the base of the spine. and allowing this process to be a bit of a pause for our day. No matter what's been going on today, no matter what's going on in the near future, let's just give ourselves a little pause to come back to this center. Without having to will anything, without having to force anything, just allowing ourselves to be where we are. Just noticing what and how we're being from a place of compassion, place of unconditional love. So from this mindful space, we're going to take a little dive into my Christmas-ish song called Gifts of Awakening.
An example of how a very ancient folklore can be incorporated into our culture without us even realizing it. When you look at the Santa Claus story, it's a perfect mythologium to analyze from this point of view. In the depths of our soul, the guardians of the dark woods take the form of the elbow, great big chance merry men, and in my slow mo, they hang red white mushrooms on trees and beneath more leaves. Christmas is about standing in front of the tree on Christmas morning with the gifts arrayed and the twinkling lights on. Well, that tree is the tree that the Amanita muscaria forms its symbiotic relationship with. Muscaria has a lot of interesting myths that are associated. They oftentimes occur late in the season when the snow covers the ground. In Siberia, it was discovered that the reindeer ate Amanita muscaria, and then the shamans first realized the yellow snow from the reindeer could be consumed for intoxication. Later on, it's well established that the shamans would eat the Amanita muscaria. And yet, if you suggest this to people, they just back away in horror. There's a really interesting thing with Santa Claus, and Santa Claus being a red suit with white accoutrements, the reindeer, Rudolph the red nose, flying through the sky. And you do have these flying-like experiences, and the idea that the onset of winter comes with it with a gift of this beautiful red mushroom.
So a couple things. One, the meditation beforehand really kind of like put me into this space, yo. I think I was like kind of hyper focused on one thing through the whole song because it gave me an imagery. Like I felt like it took me to a place, a space. And it was the bells and like the white noise between them almost. And it just felt like sparkly snow falling all around me, and I was just like blissed out with the bells the whole time.
That's funny. That's kind of like what stood out to me that run through too is actually not the bells. I actually forgot entirely about the bells. I was like hyper focused on the synth pad. That might be kind of what you're talking about. You said white noise between them. That might be what you're referring to. I
couldn't tell what all was going on, and after a while, I was like, I don't want to listen like a musician on this run.
Yeah.
Like, and try and pick out all the different things. I just want to feel it.
Totally. Yeah. The synth part in the background was what was catching my attention because it felt like the only part of it that actually felt Christmassy. But you're right, the bells definitely have the Christmas sort of aesthetic.
It was like something blended with the bells, but I couldn't even tell what I was hearing. Like, I couldn't describe it to you.
Yeah.
It was just,
I'm sure it was the synth pad. Yeah.
What was the synth pad doing?
I'll have to look to tell you exactly what even type of synth or sound it was. I mean, I made this like 2 years ago or whatever. But yeah, that it's just some kind of spacey synth pad in the background, just doing oohs and ahs, basically.
And then just like hearing the part where I was describing the mushroom, I was really tripped out because I told you like I had a dream last night that I was I don't remember all of what it was, but I remember seeing a whole bunch of mushrooms and I was just like sifting through them, and they were what are they called? The long thin ones.
There's all sorts of different types of mushrooms.
I don't know. But
some are long and thin, some are not.
Psychedelic ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So like the golden teacher type of psilocybin. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was those in the dream. I was like, oh my gosh, why are there so many? And then I was like, I ate a few.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder what's gonna happen. Because I don't have much experience with psychedelics.
Right.
And I had actually like eaten mushrooms for dinner last night, reishi, and I can't remember what the other one is. And I don't eat mushrooms a lot. But I almost kind of feel like in the dream, like the fungi kingdom spoke to me. And then it just feels really synchronistic to listen to the song today because it was just kind of like.
Yeah, that is synchronistic. That's cool. Do you remember the rest of the dream? Like, did you have much of an experience after that? You just remember eating them?
Yeah, the last couple mornings I have been dreaming vividly, but I have not been able to remember them. So. Yeah,
gotcha. Well, maybe we can do a real brief dream decode to see just a little taste, and then we could talk a little bit about that kind of process. But before we do that, I figured I would probably put this extra information in the intro of the podcast episode, but I guess you do remember like the story of the song, that it's like the alternative story of Santa Claus aesthetic and everything. Like, what do you think about that? Like, does that resonate as like more true than what's even like the standard story of it? Like, I know the red and white, like I actually asked GPT the other day about the whole thing, and they're like, the red and white comes from Coca-Cola. That like Coca-Cola did an ad in like the 20s, I want to say, like 100 years ago or something, with
the Santa Claus.
With the red and white Santa Claus, and
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and apparently before that, it had like Santa Claus was seen with like blue colors, green colors. So I don't know how true that is, but I don't know. It makes perfect sense, like the flying reindeer, you know. The fact that those types of mushrooms, Amanita muscaria, like grow under those types of trees, like the evergreen trees, and that they would dry out the mushrooms in socks over a fireplace, and that's where like the stocking imagery comes from, and the whole chimney things that like people in Siberia would usually live in like yurts, and if it got super snowy, their doors weren't accessible, so they would pop in and out of the chimney and stuff.
That's wild.
Yeah, I think so. So, and now it's just like this weird, technically a Christian holiday. I don't know what Christianity has to do with Santa Claus.
Well, also, happy solstice.
Oh yeah. That's literally today, right?
It's interesting because the solstice is the birth of the sun. And one interpretation that I've heard of Christianity is like they took the sun and replaced it with Jesus. And it's like, if you really think about it, and like, okay, there's a lot of things that line up. Like the solstice, the time of year, the return of the sun, because it's like, this is the shortest day. My goodness, it's already the shortest day. That's so trippy. But
yeah, time keeps on slipping and slipping into the future. That's for sure.
It's just, there's so many layers to our reality and the things that we accept as beliefs or facts, religion, whatever. Like, it's so many layers to it, and it's like you can't just say, "Oh, that's not true. Oh, that's not true." It's like reality has dimensions. Like I was talking to somebody about chakras yesterday, and my friend was like, "It's like I know my third eye is open, but I know it's not open because it's like, I can't see things that aren't there or whatever type thing, but I'm very aware of stuff that's going on, like the deeper meanings of things happening in the world." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's different layers."
Yeah.
And different dimensions to the aura and to the chakras. So it's like, yeah, your third eye is open on some levels, on others it's still opening. So it's like, it's not this nor that.
I think we also get a little bit tripped up about the idea of the third eye being like an eye that needs to be open in order to see. Like, I think it's a little deeper than that. So I don't think it, to your point, I don't think it is a duality of on or off. I think our third eye is literally like just part of the processing unit of, we even know that what our eyes are picking up isn't like solid reality. Like, it is an interpretation of data. It's just like, just molecules
so even the
dancing.
words that we use to describe these experiences have dimensions to them.
Absolutely. That they have their own built-in limitations. Language is just, honestly, I think of it as just another art form. So to me, language is like metaphor all the time. And I think we get really tripped up and entangled with the idea that the words we use are factual, even the word facts, like facts are fluid. I'm sure you and I have talked about that a million times.
Yeah, it's just like whenever getting into this kind of conversation, like the first thing I think about is all the empty space inside the atom.
Yeah.
Like, everything that's here isn't really here.
Yeah, and what do you think about like dark matter and stuff? Dark energy. Have you delved into those terms at all?
Oh, yeah, I don't know much about it.
I don't think anyone knows much about it. Like, that's the thing.
I don't know about the theories about it.
Okay, yeah, well, it's a big mystery.
I'm not familiar with that literature.
Gotcha, yeah. No, it's a huge question mark in the scientific realm for sure, but they have somehow, I probably couldn't even explain this that well, but somehow they've been able to measure or have some sense that there's some force or some matter that they call dark matter, some energy that they call dark energy, and basically dark meaning that, they just can't perceive it tangibly, but they see like the effects of it or something like that. Again, it's way over my head, way over my pay grade, but that I've heard something about like the universe being like, I don't know if it's over 50%. It's a very large percent of the physical universe is mostly dark matter, which is just crazy. Like, is that like the like data of realms that are outside of our, like, different timelines? Is it like a parallel timeline thing, and like that's everything
Yeah.
outside of our current timeline? Like this is like
Yeah.
matter that
Oh.
we can perceive, and then everything outside of that is like dark matter. Is that what it is? I have no idea, but it's, I mean, it's pretty interesting to think that there's just, you know, these types of scientific huge question marks, these huge mysteries,
Mhm.
and I just think it's
This
fun.
this actually reminds me. So last night I was telling someone about how a couple days ago I was sitting here in my room and I heard this buzzing noise. I'm like, what is that? And I'm like looking all around my room, and I can tell that what I'm hearing is like two things clinking against each other in my room. And it's like it will go steady for like a few minutes and then stop for like a minute and then go steady for a few minutes. And so this was like 20 or 30 minutes. I was trying to figure out where the sound was was coming from. And it's like I knew it wasn't originating from the two things clinking against each other. I knew that there was a vibration passing through the house, like causing them to clink against each other. And so as I'm looking for it, and after I find out like the two objects and move them apart from each other, I'm just sitting there thinking like, holy crap, there's literally a sound that was passing through the house that I couldn't hear, and I couldn't feel it either. It's like I didn't feel any shaking or vibration or hum coming up through the ground or anything.
Yeah.
And but something was passing through the house, causing the clinking. So I found it was a pin sitting next to a glass lamp on my bedstand.
Okay.
And it's like, it caused the steady, like, but I heard nothing. It was like no machine going outside that I could hear. There was, and I'm really sensitive to sound and vibration. So it's like, if it was perceptible, I probably would have felt it, like shaking the house or heard the sound.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is absolutely outstanding. And it just reminds me of how many things are going on in this one moment, in this very space that I'm inhabiting, that I cannot even perceive. So like all the cell phone signals is one thing that I think about, but also like frequencies, like whatever the heck that was causing the pin and the lamp to clunk against each other and brrr for so long, and me not be able to hear it, see it, nothing.
Yeah.
That was kind of humbling, and it just reminded me is like how big all of this is.
Yeah, right.
How far beyond us it is.
And just how much there is that goes under our radar. Like there's just so many millions of bits of data happening in every moment. Trillions, I'm sure. More than that, whatever. You know,
Infinite.
right. And we can only like minimize our focus. Like we can only focus on one thing at a time, essentially. You know, so our like consciousness is only taking in a small percentage of what our subconsciousness is probably even bringing in from all of those data points. You know what I mean? Yeah. And let me move my little character box here so we have a better frame. But yeah, what that made me think of too is not just like all the Wi-Fi signals in the air and like EMFs, you know, if you will. Like that's a relatively new thing. Like our grandparents and the other generations, for the massive like percentage of most of human history, haven't like been swimming in this like electromagnetic soup that we just live in now. You know, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing, but it is a different thing. It's something that I'm sure our physical bodies that have been developing for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, you know, haven't had to adapt to until now, you know. And I definitely don't say that to create paranoia in myself or in you or in anyone listening to this conversation. I think it's, you know, this kind of like relates to like getting sick and stuff too. I've been really just like trying to reframe things instead of like playing victim and like, I'm sick. It's like, I'm detoxing. Like, this is literally how the body grows its immunities. It's like, no, you have to take some time to like have a sore throat, take extra time to rest, you know, whatever.
Because the body learns from that.
Because the body learns from that. Yeah, totally. So, you know, I want to think it's probably similar with the electromagnetic interference in the air too. Like, you know, like I'm not going to say it's making us sick or making us ADHD or scattered and all this stuff. Like, you could go down that rabbit hole. You could go down that timeline, but I'm going to say
I
like,
just don't like to ignore that it does affect us.
yeah. Well, how do you think it affects us? Have you had any like personal experiences with that you would relate to, or just stories that you've heard?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sensitive. I'm sensitive to everything, but like
Yeah.
what I've noticed with EMFs is that I feel like they kind of like pull at me. So I keep my phone off a lot. I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And
Respect.
aside from like actual distractions, like I can feel. So I've always been able to feel like the buzz and the hum and stuff of appliances and things. And like while the new phones, the cell phones and stuff are quieter, I still feel them. It's like I can feel when you turn on like a laptop or a computer near me, and it's like, like I feel the electricity in the air kind of change. So,
See what you mean?
it's kind of like, remember the old TVs? It's like when you turn them on, it was just kind of like, like you feel almost like the static in the air.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right.
I was thinking about this because I was around an old TV last night.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and it's like, so one of my first cell phones when I was younger in like middle school or high school, I think it was probably high school. I noticed that I could tell every time when I was about to get a text message before my phone even rang, because it made this really high pitched sound, and like I could feel it. I could feel the burst of energy on its way to my phone.
Whoa.
And or I don't know if it was my phone receiving the burst of energy or what. So it's like there's definitely something to it, and it's like I know when I have a Bluetooth on for a really long time. Oh, I forgot to turn off my speaker. Like after it's been on for a long time, I start feeling like kind of agitated.
So you have felt like negative effects.
Yeah, but also something I wanted to tell you, and which is like just kind of a theory of something I'm wondering about that's been happening to me, is I'm starting to realize it's like when I just sit with my mind. I've been meditating a lot the last few months, and I'm noticing that in moments, even when I'm just not meditating, I start picking up on like these freaking stories and shit, and like seeing movies in my head that I haven't seen before. And I've started wondering, like, am I picking up on like television signals and stuff? And like sometimes like I feel like I'm hearing people talking, like a conversation. I'm like, is this me? Like, is my mind just making this up, or am I tuning in to like an actual conversation that's happening somewhere? And that has been tripping me out. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's like it's happened enough times at this point where I'm like, I'm fucking watching a movie in my head right now. Like, I don't think this is just my subconscious type thing.
Yeah. Or at least like the furthest reaches of your subconsciousness, where it turns into other people's subconsciousness, you know? But yeah, you're blowing my mind. I was just nodding so enthusiastically because, it reminds me of, first of all, I have had similar experiences myself, but it reminds me of, there was this like psychic convention. I like half feel like you might have gone with me one year. But there's this one that happens in Cincinnati called Victory of Light, like 2 times a year. And I used to go there sometimes. And this one person was giving a talk. It's just like kind of a day event at a convention center where they have like various workshops or talks and whatever that you can, pick and choose which ones you want to go to. And so this one person was presenting whatever it was. And they were just talking about, I don't know if they were a medium or something like that, but they were talking about their experiences of, how they identify as being a psychic person, and how living in the city was like very challenging for them, because they'd be in their apartment and they would be just picking up on all of, obviously, what being in a city's like, so much energy. Yeah. So many other people's stories. And they were just like, they couldn't have a quiet moment because they were always like getting pinged by other people's frequencies.
Oh my God.
And it just sort of blew my mind too, the way you described it, because it made me think about like even relating it to dark energy, the way I was saying like maybe dark energy is like the timelines outside of our own, right? Like our frequency, think about like, a radio dial or whatever, or like you said, a TV. Like all of those channels exist, like on an old school TV, but you had to like dial to the channel that you are focusing on and perceiving. Like, so all
Yeah.
the other channels, like that's how I kind of think about it. Like, you know, your story as distinct from my story, we're on different channels, you know. And I have been in experiences where I felt like I've had access to other people's channels, like
Yeah.
not consciously, not people I know, but just like, I mean, honestly, I have this one particular memory of being rather baked in my parents' basement. And not to throw shade, but my parents' basement isn't the most like organized space. And I was just like really high and just like I remember like turning off the light or something, and I just like had this moment of like just hearing, like you said, like these stories, almost like I was tuning into a different radio station. I'm like, whose thoughts are these? Like, who are these voices? What are they talking about? It just felt like complete nonsense.
You turn on a walkie-talkie and like flip channels, and you can hear like truckers talking.
Yeah,
like that's what it felt like.
Just like that. Just like that. Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of wild.
I'm like, what did I just walk in on?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it wasn't scary. It wasn't like I felt like I was hearing voices in like a scary way or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just random. And I guess the randomness, like the first time that happened, like maybe sort of disturbed me because it was just like, what? Yeah, just like you said, WTF? Like, what's going on here?
I literally never told anybody that.
Really?
And, like, it's so funny that I have now, and like you can relate.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's so trippy.
It's not. It's definitely not like a frequent occurrence for me. It's not something I think about a lot. But yeah, you had like a resounding resonance with what I was saying about the psychic in the city. Do you want to speak any to that?
Gosh, I love how you like remember and pick up on things during the conversation. But yeah, because like I had an aha moment because I remember living. So like I've moved a bit the last few years, and I've lived in like kind of very different environments.
Yeah, well, you live in Chicago now, and you've lived in New York City.
Well, I'm actually in a suburb
okay.
now.
Gotcha.
And I lived downtown Chicago for a year before I came out here. And like it was kind of similar to living in New York, but it was even more congested than the part of New York that I was living in. And it's just like, oh my goodness, I think just living so close to so many people. Like, I lived in an apartment building downtown, so it was like people above me, people below me, people next to me on two sides. Luckily, I was on a corner, so it wasn't like people next to me on, three sides.
Yeah.
And I definitely noticed a difference. It was like I felt like I couldn't calm down a lot more often. And then it's like, so I had grown up in the city, but like not in a congested area like downtown.
Okay.
It was just like a block with, a regular number of houses on it. Each house like 6 feet apart. I don't know.
Right.
And then I moved to New York, which was like more crowded because it was like the houses were up against each other where I lived in Brooklyn. And then there were people above and below you as well. Because it was like brownstones where I was living. So they were each like 3 or 4 floors high.
Okay.
But it was still more chill than downtown Chicago.
Sure,
then I live downtown Chicago where it's like everything is bustling 24/7. Ambulances and cell phone towers so close together.
And you had those big old windows, and you're like downtown, like South Loop.
Yeah, and I lived on a busy intersection of downtown. I lived on State Street, which is like
yeah. Wait, is that what they call it? The South Loop? What's
downtown?
What's that area called? Is it called the South Loop, or is it called something else?
South Loop.
South Loop.
South Loop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, basically around all the Columbia buildings.
Yeah, more or less.
And what was I gonna say? The noise, people, busy.
Yeah, just the stimulation, just the psychic noise.
And it's like it made me think about like how many Wi-Fi routers were surrounding me.
Oh yeah, well. No doubt.
And man, it's like, and then I moved out here to the suburbs. It's the quietest place I've ever lived in my life. The houses are like, they're actual distances apart.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just
And
right on top of other people's living situations.
yeah,
It's just
like,
wild. It's just a trippy thing to think about.
Anywhere. I can't walk anywhere out here.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I feel like I really needed that slowing down, and I didn't realize it until I've been out here for a minute. I feel like I've had a chance to freaking catch my breath, which has been a blessing. It's been very isolated, but it's been a blessing because I've needed this level of stillness.
Totally. Yeah, all about balance for sure. So on the topic of like EMFs and the Wi-Fi's and all the everything else in the air, do you feel like in general it is pretty innocuous? Do you feel like there's anything that we could or would be beneficial for us to like protect ourselves or balance out those frequencies?
Radiation. So cancer levels are gonna go up. I've heard that people living near these. So also it's like different towers are different frequencies. So the 5G is it's like more intense, you know, than the other signals that we've been used to.
It's like a larger wave.
And the towers are being installed on like residential buildings and things, and it's like I can't even imagine like what's happening to the people there, because being that close to so many like signals that provide for such a large area and the amount of like radiation coming off of them, and we already know what radiation is, what radiation does. Like Marie Curie helped us out with that, and you know we know what happened to her, so.
Wait, remind me.
It's pretty serious.
What are you referring to? I don't catch that reference.
Marie Curie, she was a scientist who was studying radioactivity, and she kept like a tube of, I forget what they're called, like a radioactive isotope or something, and she kept like a tube of it in her pocket, and I think she got breast cancer or something, and it's just like. Like radioactivity destroys our cells. It breaks them down, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know too much more about that. I'm not going to speak more on that, but it's like really bad for our bodies.
Yeah, it's disruptive.
And so it's like the types of frequencies with new frequencies such as like 5G and stuff, and then also like the higher and higher amount of them, because you get more and more people using phones, and you know it's like a lot of the apps and stuff we use are designed to be addictive, so there's even more packets of like signal going through the air, and it's like more and more and more and more and more and more. So that's something I think about a lot, and it's like I was really scared of it for a time, but like you said, it's like I don't like approaching stuff from like, oh my god, we're gonna die. Yeah. It's like, okay, it's like if we're still alive, at least part of us is dealing with it.
Right.
We may not always know that certain things that we're experiencing are because of it, though, like illnesses and stuff.
Right.
But there's a lot of cancer. There's a lot of cancer. And my guess is that it's not normal.
Yeah.
Because,
yeah.
So
true.
And that's just like one thing I can think of off the top of my head, but.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's actually a really great point to be reminded of, because I feel like the cultural zeitgeist around cancer is like this idea of like, if you live unhealthily, then you'll get cancer. But it's like so many people that have healthy lifestyles still get zapped with something sometimes, you know?
And also, that's such a small, or not a small part, but that's only one part of it, because like cancer, like I'm sure like any illness or disease is it also has its mental aspects. It's like the mental and emotional energy behind it. So it's like if you look at cancer, I don't know if I should go into this right now. I'm really kind of like passionate about the energetics behind cancer, because it's like it's been such a big theme in my family. Like my mom actually passed from cancer a few years ago, and it's like Gabor Mate. Have you heard of him? Yeah. talks a lot about the energetics behind cancer and how it's like a lack of boundaries, basically. And that's also what happens with like physically, like there's a lack of boundary of when the cell is, it's not receiving the signal to stop growing, so it's like it has no boundaries.
Right.
But it's like that's also happening in the person's life as well. It's like they're not setting boundaries with other people or situations and things, and they're a lot of times people with cancer are giving too much of themselves away and not taking care of themselves. So it's just
Yeah.
it's a lot of aspects to it, and I just realized that the radiation doesn't help, because it's like it's part of the programming. It's telling the cell not to have boundaries. And what happens with all this communication anyway? It's like we don't have boundaries a lot of the time. It's like a lot of times if somebody texts you and they don't like hear back immediately, they get upset. You know, I think we're getting better with that, but it's like it's a boundary. So it's like I turn off my phone for long chunks of the day because I can't. It's just too much. It's too much having the whole world at my fingertips and everyone basically having access to you through your phone. You know, it's like everybody in your life whose phone number you have that you know literally has complete access to you 24/7 if you have your phone on.
Yeah, and just having access, it is wild. And just the reverse too, that we have access to, you know, basically any number of stories on the internet, you know, like, I mean, we will probably upload this conversation to the internet, you know, and we're like sending out a signal like, hey, tune into us. We're like sharing a loving vibe and reminding ourselves of things that might actually like be beneficial to our lives in the future, and also just sharing presence and stuff and whatever, you know. And not that it's something that everyone needs, but it's like, you know, this is part of the game that we're like playing as humans, as we like show up in this digital space and hopefully with like an energy that might be beneficial to people, you know. But it's like, you know, get on TikTok and you just like swipe through all of these different timelines. It's just like it's absolutely wild, you know.
So quickly too, in such a short period of time before you can really even process it.
Yeah, and just like drawing it back to the conversation of like the evolution of the human, like we just haven't had any time to adapt to this yet. Like TikTok hasn't even been here as long as you and I have been here, you know, like it's just a wild thing. But I'm trying to think.
Oh, that's trippy.
Yeah, there was a few things I wanted to respond to that you mentioned though, so I'm trying to reel it back and remember.
Okay.
But you were talking about like the lack of boundaries, which was something that I wanted to say before we even got onto the topic of like cancer and stuff like that, when we're talking about how you were just saying how much EMFs are in the atmosphere because of how much we are using our devices and how addictive these things are and all of that. So that was something I thought of, was like personal boundaries of like, and collective boundaries of like, hey, let's maybe make some critical assessments and decisions around like how much do we actually need to be moving into the direction of being so reliant on the internet and on these devices, you know, like is this something that we are consenting to? Is this something that we want?
I feel like we're externalizing a lot of our brains too, because you know, even just with GPS, it's like people don't know how to read maps anymore.
Yeah, or just like learn directions. I don't know. I saw a comedy bit the other day of this guy that was saying that like, yeah, I always keep my GPS on, and I don't remember the bit. I don't know why I brought it up, but basically he was just like using GPS to like go home. It's like turn right into your driveway. Yeah. So whatever. But yeah, you're right. Like a lot of it is like at the expense of keeping our brain sharp. You know, like these big thoughtful brains are here to be tools for us to, you know, be orienting ourselves into our reality. And when we don't need to rely on it for our survival to the extent that most of our ancestors did, right? Then like, yeah, no wonder we end up with anxiety, depression, ADHD, and all of these like expressions of like, where do I put my energy? You know, where do I put my thoughtfulness? Where do I put my mental energy? You know, and anyway, another thing that I was thinking of, you were just talking about like the connection between the mind and the body, the mental emotional connection and everything when you're speaking about cancer and diseases of any sorts. I fully believe that as well. And just to your point, it is all connected. And whether, you know, not to make a general statement, I'm not saying that you're doing this, but just to clarify, like, I don't think either of us feels like it's a blanket statement of, you know, anyone that has cancer is like doesn't know how to set boundaries or something like that. But like on some level, like, you know, we were talking about the limitation of language earlier today, you know, like on some level that is like part of that dynamic, you know, even if only on a cellular level.
It does play out in so many different ways. Even just like where the cancer appears in the body gives so much information.
Yeah.
But and it's like, as an energy worker, it's like when I find things in people's, sorry, I'm just laughing because I saw one of my reoccurring numbers.
Nice.
As someone who does energy work and I scan people's energy fields to, you know, just kind of like figure out what's going on before I work on them, I noticed that like I can get a general idea of things that are happening sometimes because they feel similar, and if they're located in a certain area, it's like I know it's related to this or that. And but it's like you can never assume because it really is different for everyone. We're so incredibly complex on an individual level.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, while we do have general things in common, how something plays out in our lives and how it shows up in our body and our energy field is so, so different. And sometimes it's really hard to get to the root of it.
Yeah.
Because one interpretation I've heard, and I had a hard time kind of like processing it with the just knowing about the boundaries thing, is one interpretation I've had of cancer is like holding on to small resentments over time and then piling up. But it's like recently I realized I'm like, that's the same thing as like having a hard time with boundaries. It's kind of like hoarding, you know, like hoarding certain emotions. So it's like even hoarding is one other thing that you might see when cancer comes up in somebody's life. So it's so many things that are related on the physical, emotional, spiritual, all these different planes that we operate on. So it's like you have to look at the whole picture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's wild that I feel like so many Americans have been like conditioned away from that understanding, you know, and that we see ourselves as basically just biological machines, and that the body is like totally separate from the mind, and our emotions don't affect, you know, our health and stuff like that. But of course they do. You know, if you have anger and or resentment in your mind and in your body multiple days, multiple years on end, of course that's going to affect the way that we're able to like reach equilibrium in the world and in our bodies, you know, like, so to me, it is like almost just like self-evident, the connection, you know, and there's also just cultures that do have a history of that understanding, you know, like we think of like Eastern medicine, and that's way more a part of their approach, whether it be Chinese medicine or Ayurveda or whatever it may be, you know, all the ones that don't have names that are, you know, buzzwords and new agey circles and whatever, you know. But yeah, so that's a good reminder. Just to, yeah, what I mean, what do you say we do with that information? You know, other than just being more honest with ourselves as far as like what boundaries we would benefit from creating, either socially or with ourselves, with how we interact with technology. You know, I think that's really like brave and admirable that you turn off your phone. I don't know anyone else that ever turns off their phone. You know?
Well, I mean, like for me though, it's like I have to because I feel so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Even just knowing that it's on sometimes overwhelms me, even if it's in a different part of the house. So it's like a big part of it is by necessity. I don't feel like I have a choice. And it's really interesting because like some of my family members have gotten really upset with me for doing that because they're like, well, what if we need you in an emergency? And it's like, I'm going to have to just be really tapped into my intuition about, like, because, you know, I get intuitive hits sometimes about when to turn my phone back on.
I'm sure, yeah.
And a lot of times, like, somebody will reach out to me, like, right after I turn on my phone. It's like, you know, it's like not a backlogged call or text or anything, but like literally right after I turn my phone. So that's something that I set an intention for whenever I turn off my phone. It's like, all right, spirit, help me know when it's time.
Yeah.
Like, help me know if somebody needs to reach me. Give me that psychic ping.
Yep. The old school text message intuition.
Yeah. But because it's like sometimes if I know I need to reach out to somebody in like an emergency, I'll get a feeling about them or start thinking about them or have a dream about them. So
yeah. Dig it.
But wait, there was another part of that question that I wanted to answer.
Yeah, I was going to use that. I was going to use that because you said dream. I was going to use that as a segue into the other thing I want to talk about. But yeah, I want to give you a chance to fully answer the question. I was asking just generally if there's anything that you felt like how do we orient ourselves to? Yeah, you got it.
So something that I think is really important with like coming into the understanding of boundaries is it's like if I would give folks something to walk away with on that segment of this conversation, is that you have to build a relationship with yourself in a way that you're able to be aware of when something is like intruding upon your boundaries, or like you just have to become aware of boundaries. And most people aren't, because a lot of the ways that we're conditioned is to do what other people want us to do, right, and what's expected of us. And in order to do those things, especially from a young age, it's at the expense of being tuned into ourselves, because it's like as soon as you have to start doing something that goes against what you were already like naturally doing, you have to cut off part of yourself. And for a lot of us, that happens in childhood. And that part that gets cut off is our sensitivity to what's right for us and what isn't.
Dang.
So I think the first step on the boundaries journey is just like, and it takes practice, like just learning to hear yourself, because sometimes our voice is so small because it's been crushed down for so long. And it's like learning to like trust your body when it's telling you like you're uncomfortable in a situation, instead of just pushing through it and, you know, trying to be nice socially if you're like in a situation where you don't feel comfortable. It's like, no, just like start questioning. So start questioning how you're feeling in each moment, and I feel like that's a good start to
definitely
figuring out your boundaries, and then eventually, you know, enforcing them. Boundaries.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to know what they are first, and in order to do that, it takes practice listening to yourself.
One thing I'll add to that, I love what you're saying, by the way. One thing I'll add is something that's come up in conversations with other people with me recently, is that part of the thing about blurry boundaries is that a lot of times it comes from not knowing what we want. You know, so that's another component to this, is like getting really real with ourselves as to like, what kind of life do I want to build? What kind of story do I want to be in? What genre of existence do I want to exist in? You know?
Yeah.
What are our desires? You know? And,
that's when you start figuring out what you want, is when you can hear your own voice.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
For sure, that's part of it. Yeah.
It takes time. It takes that like high quality solitude to come to clarity on those things, for sure. And then I just feel
dialogue.
And a dialogue, is that what you said?
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be solitude necessarily, just like a dialogue with yourself. Like, check in with yourself constantly. How am I feeling? How did that situation make me feel? How can I validate what I'm feeling?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think I might have told you this, but one of my friends gave me this illustration about boundaries the other day, and I think it's really valuable, so I'm going to share it. The idea is like when we don't know what we want, our boundaries are like a fuzzy like
Yeah.
unclear boundary. Whereas like when we do, it's like a solid circle around us, a solid aura around us, you know, because we're clear on our yeses and nos because we know what we want, you know. So if we don't know what we want and then we have that fuzzy boundary, then other people interact with us and our auras are, you know, the Venn diagram of our auras. And it's like, well, they have their desires and their yeses and nos, and we may pick up on that, like, oh, is this even my desire or is it theirs? You know, and you like losing your sense of self in that way because you haven't already like solidified a super stable sense of self, you know?
It's like, because like a lot of people don't even know that they're being influenced.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing whether something is coming from outside of you or within you is like, that's part of this journey that, you know, that starts with learning to listen to yourself. And I swear it really does take practice, because like this is literally something I've just been figuring out over the last few years, at least consciously. I've been working on it for many years, but it really came to a point where I could articulate it like within the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've had a huge problem with boundaries because I don't know what I want. I don't know how to listen to myself. I don't know how to, you there?
Yep.
I don't know how, like, I didn't know how to trust, and I didn't know how to trust myself and what I was feeling and validate myself. It's like I would always dismiss what I was feeling because it didn't line up with, you know, the program.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel you. Yeah. Beautiful. I think that's a really good place to end off here. I think my phone's about to die. But but as a little bonus, do you want to do a real quick a sample of what a dream decoding looks like? Because you mentioned mushrooms. Should we decode that symbol?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's just literally use the mushroom as the symbol and decode that. So for anyone that hasn't heard this method before, the idea is that we define each of the key symbols. So in this case, the mushroom. I'm going to ask Selena, like I am a 5-year-old or like an alien, don't understand anything about English. Describe, define mushroom. What is a mushroom?
So, to me, a mushroom, and my definition of it, because I haven't worked with mushrooms much, like I said.
Yeah.
So, to me, it is a thing that grows out of the earth, and it comes in many different forms. Some are dangerous. Some are wonderfully mind-blowing, mind-altering.
Mm-hmm.
Some are absolutely delicious, like the ones that I had for dinner last night.
Nice.
And they can be very healing, but also poisonous. So it's like, yeah, it's like a family. Like how there's the plant family, there's the fungi family that mushrooms are in. So,
okay,
is that a definition?
That's it. Yep.
Okay,
so
cool.
I don't have my pad of paper that I would usually take notes of you saying that. So I'm going to do it by memory. But now we're going to try to find what our association is. So I'm going to ask, what about your current life? What about yourself? What about any situation that you're currently involved in your life do you think of when I say something that comes from the earth that is potentially really healing or potentially poisonous? The fungi family can be beautifully delicious, beautifully mind-blowing, potentially dangerous. Does that remind you of anything in your life?
People.
Interesting. Okay.
Like people and connections, which is really funny because I guess a continuation of the themes from the other dream. So.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, you're right. So it's like people and like the subtext of there being like a potential risk, right? Could be like beautifully healing, could be hurtful, right? Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say we decoded the symbol of mushroom for Selena. We figured out that mushroom equals people. So then you would look back and look at your dream or just the fact that this has come up. through my song and through the meal you had yesterday, and just like you interacting with mushrooms in this way, like, so that's like you interacting with people, and so, and the dream you had where you're basically
sifting through.
Yeah, maybe like sifting through, like, what was the energy of that in the dream? You were just like, were you looking for something, or you were just
through? I was organizing them. Also just feeling kind of surprised, like, how did all of these get here?
Yeah.
And also it's like, should I like relate that to my life? Because I do see.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
It's lately I've been feeling a lot more social, and so I've been reconnecting with people from my life and just realizing how rich of a network that I have that I'm in already, and just didn't really realize it because I haven't been engaging much with it. Or when I was engaging with some of those connections, I just wasn't fully present, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I was dealing with my own traumas and things. So
right.
It's like, it was just kind of the feeling of like, how did all these mushrooms or people, how did all of these get here? Like, there's such an abundance. Like, how did I end up with these?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, like, where did all this connection come from? Where did all these potential connections, potential healing, potential deliciousness, potential not so much. Yeah. And
it's like, I'm at such a different space in my life, I think, particularly the last few months, because a lot of the habits that I formed have given me more confidence. And I think when you have confidence, you move differently in your connections and relationships, and you experience them differently. So I think that's just what's happening to me right now, honestly.
Absolutely.
I'm like, holy crap, like, I've had all these awesome people in my life and just didn't realize it.
Well, now you're ready to meet them, ready to show up in a different way. I love that. Well, I feel like my phone is about to die, so I'm going to thank you so much for doing this, and it's a gift to talk to you every time we speak. So thanks for being such a good friend. I love you. Speak to you soon.
No future, no past, just the mind spinning fast. Only light reflections and fragmentations of conceptual memory and projection. Your presence cannot die. Time is witnessing of the mind. The lies it feeds the eye. Silence speaks in each and every molecular dancing, expressing as infinity. Oh, whispering of the mystery, luring me